Good evening and welcome to the Monday Night Live Countdown Show from Courtroom Confidential, the fastest growing true crime news channel on YouTube. I decided to get dressed up for you guys this evening. I wanted to make it feel a little special. It is completely a coincidence and unrelated that directly after doing this, I'm going to hop on Court TV with Vinny Politan to talk about Menendez Brothers. But we're going to talk about it first. So you guys are getting the scoop in advance. But because of that, I have to hop off a little bit early. I'm already stressing out the folks over at Court TV a little bit by not being there super early for the audio and video check-in. And I said, listen, I've got things to do. I'm a little bit busy. Can I hop on about 5 minutes early? And they said, sure, we think that should be good. So I'm going to have to jump off of here at like 6 minutes till the top of the hour so that I can get myself prepared to go on Court TV and talk with Vinny about Menendez. But you guys don't have to do that because you're already going to hear everything I have to say anyways. And if you sit tight, you will be magically transported over to our live premiere later this evening, which is why we do this whole kind of run-up countdown show anyways, because premiering tonight is the latest episode in our Courtroom Confidential Conversation series, and this one is with Candice DeLong. Candice is the real deal. I got to tell you, she is amazing. There she is. She was an FBI profiler back in the days when there were basically no other special agents who were females in the FBI. And she was in that behavioral science unit. If you've ever watched, what is the name of the show? Now I'm totally blanking on it, but Mindhunter on Netflix, she knew those guys. She was a part of that whole beginning team and would hunt down these people back in the early days of how they were trying to figure out how to find serial killers, essentially. And now she's written a book and gone on to television and everything else. And she's a huge icon in the true crime world. And she's also a dear friend of mine because she took me under her wing and had me as a guest for several different episodes of her current very popular podcast called Killer Psyches. If you haven't listened or checked out Killer Psyche, do yourself a favor and check it out. She does amazing work over there. It's always one of the top rated. And she breaks it down with her own unique background of being a FBI profiler. And so I've been a guest on her show a few times, and we've developed a friendship. And I said, hey, Candice, would you like to sit down and have me pick your brain for once, put you in the interrogation seat and find out everything that you went through in the early beginnings of your career and since then. And it's a fascinating conversation. It was one of those where I thought that we could do 2 or 3 parts to this whole thing. And so we tried to crunch it all down into about an hour. And she gave us some incredible stories of some of the people that she's hunted down. I mean, she was a real badge carrying, gun carrying FBI agent. So very cool stuff. But we're going to talk a little bit about some breaking news today with the Menendez brothers and with the Jeffrey Ferguson case in Orange County. And maybe if we have time, we'll get into cases that are going to be taking place this week. And we'll have announcements at the end. But in the meantime, please like this if you haven't already. Please subscribe if you haven't already. But let's jump right into it. Hello to everybody in the chat. Alicia K. Mayo and Cyber Sleuth Steph and Shy Gal and Farm Girl and Donna Barnes. You guys are all fantabulous for being here. Okay, so Nathan Hochman called another press conference today. This guy enjoys press conferences. He likes calling them and he likes speaking at length during these press conferences. He's also a very good speaker. I will give him that. And he spoke today for another 30, 40 minutes extemporaneously, just talking about this case and what their position is on it. Just to revisit, the Menendez brothers have 3 basically avenues in which they're trying to get released from prison. They're currently serving life without parole. The first is that they have a habeas petition. A habeas is when you've run out of all other options and it's kind of your last Hail Mary to the court. Hochman announced last month that the DA's office was going to oppose that. That basically makes it dead in the water. The next is the motion for resentencing. That's what he talked about today during his very verbose. That's a great word for it, Afton. His resentencing today, that's what he talked about, the position he would take on that. And then finally is clemency, which is a power that just exists in the governor's office. He could do that at any point. It didn't require anything that's happening right now. Governor Newsom has the power to grant them some sort of clemency. So, like I said, the habeas, it's after you exhausted all your appeals. You have to present some sort of new evidence, and that new evidence has to be such that it would convince the appellate court that you might have had a different turnout at trial had you been granted this evidence, had you had this evidence available to you. Hochman turned that down, said we're opposing it for the following reasons, and did this hour-long press conference basically spelling out why he's opposing it. And he was very thorough at the time in explaining all of the facts about the crimes themselves. And I thought to myself, this guy is making a soft landing. What he's doing is he's laying the basis for how he's going to oppose the motion to resentence. And that is, in fact, what actually happened today. But there's one interesting little twist and caveat in this whole thing. First of all, he said that there's actually two reasons, and I wasn't aware of this, and he didn't really explain it, but he says there's two reasons why this motion for resentencing is in front of the court. One is the DA initiated motion that was by George Gascon, who asked to have the Menendez brothers resentenced so that they would be eligible for parole. And then the other, he said, is court initiated, and that the court initiated hearing is going to take place on March 20th, and that the DA's office will participate in that. So even after today, even after everything we're going to go through, he essentially said, we're still going to show up March 20th and see what the judge has to say, which is bizarre to me. But what the DA did today is essentially withdrew Gascon's opinion, Nathan Hochman did, and submitted his own opinion. And that opinion wasn't just simply saying we withdraw George Gascon's opinion. He filed an 87-page motion explaining why he doesn't feel that it's appropriate that they receive resentencing. 60 pages of which were statement of facts. If you've ever read a motion, the statement of facts is usually the appetizer, the salad course of the motion. It gives you just kind of an understanding of the facts, and then the real meat and potatoes is what follows afterwards, and that's the law and motion, the arguments. Here, they spent the vast majority of it talking about the facts. They went back through the entire case and laid out exactly how heinous and awful these crimes really were, to set up the idea as to why they feel that they are not appropriate for resentencing. If you are a fan of the Menendez brothers, not a fan of them, but if you are in support of them getting out, today, I think, was a real setback, to the point that I think it's nearly impossible that they'll get out at this point. Having those words now left my mouth, I will probably end up eating them in a little while because something else will change. But the way things are right now, he is going to go ahead and withdraw the people's position, the people's request for a resentencing, and oppose resentencing to the court. Now, the reason that he did that is clever for a couple of reasons. He talked a lot about, and I wrote down his words. I took extensive notes. I was actually sitting at the station at ABC 7 to talk with them about this, and I took notes on what he was saying during the press conference so that I could sound like I knew what I was talking about when they went to me on camera. And he kept on repeating the phrase that they have not taken a full insight into their actions and a complete acceptance of responsibility. In other words, he feels that now, 30 years later, they are still clinging to the idea that this was in self-defense. They are still clinging to the idea that that they told the truth, that they didn't try to get others to lie for them. He outlined what he felt were 16 lies that he called them. 16 lies that he feels that they are still promoting and standing by. That all being said, his conclusion is basically they're liars, and liars shouldn't get an opportunity to be resentenced. This is a quote from Hochman. Because the brothers persist in telling these lies for the last 30 years about their self-defense and persist in insisting that they did not suborn any perjury or attempt to suborn perjury, then they do not meet the standards for resentencing. They do not meet the standards for rehabilitation. I mean, he really, really closed the door on the idea that they do not qualify. And it's not so much for the crimes, as awful as they are. It's not because of their behavior since they've been in prison, because it's been essentially without blemish. There's been some issues, but nothing that would disqualify them. In fact, their risk assessment level is incredibly low. But he feels that because they have not taken insight and acceptance, full acceptance and responsibility for their actions, that they shouldn't qualify. Well, why is he using those words? Why are those words so important? This gets back to kind of the clemency issue. If you remember, Gavin Newsom requested that a risk assessment be done of the brothers in anticipation of potentially entertaining the idea of clemency, granting them clemency. And Hochman spent a large part of this press conference today talking about a man by the name of Sirhan Sirhan. You may remember him as the notorious assassin who killed RFK. And this was back in 1968. Well, he was eligible for parole for reasons I don't have the time to get into now. He was eligible for parole. He went up for parole several times and was denied. And finally, the parole board recommended parole for him. Gavin Newsom denied that. That's another power that the governor has. He denied the recommendation of the parole board and sent him back to prison. And the reason that Gavin Newsom gave at the time, and tell me if this sounds familiar, was, quote, Sirhan still lacks insight and refuses to accept responsibility. Essentially, that is one of the prongs in trying to establish if someone has demonstrated that they are ready for rehabilitation and to enter back into society. And though Sirhan was advanced in age, though he had a very low risk assessment, though he basically presented across the board every reason why he should enjoy parole, Gavin Newsom identified that his failure to accept responsibility alone was a disqualifying factor. And Nathan Hochman today said that that is the reason that I too am saying that they are not eligible for resentencing. And I thought, boy, is that clever, because he's doing a couple of things there. He's not only giving you a reason for why he's making the decision, but he's essentially now painted Gavin Newsom into the corner. It's still up to Gavin Newsom if he wants to grant them clemency. He's always enjoyed that. Like I said, nothing has added to that or taken away from it. He can do it whenever he wants. But now he's used Gavin Newsom's own kind of position on a previous very famous case to show why that shouldn't be applied to the Menendez brothers now. Even after all of that, he did something, Nathan Hochman, that I thought was, whether you want to call it clever, whether you want to call it politically savvy, or whether you want to call it mean. He did something at the end that I described as a challenge. He essentially challenged the Menendez brothers. He said, I'm not saying never. I'm saying you change your tune, you come clean, you admit responsibility and where you've been lying in the past. And we'll take a look at this case. This is his quote. It's a long quote, but you got to listen to this. And let me take a sip out of my Courtroom Confidential mug. What do we call this? It's not a mug. This is his quote from today, Nathan Hochman. If the Menendez brothers at some point unequivocally, sincerely, and fully accept complete responsibility for all their criminal actions, acknowledge that the self-defense defense was phony and that their parents weren't going to kill them, and finally come clean with the court, with the public, with the DA's office, with their own family members, and acknowledge all these lies, in the future, the court can weigh these new insights into making a determination as to whether they now qualify for rehabilitation and resentencing, and the DA's office will do the same. In other words, if you guys are willing to come clean, if you're willing to say we've been lying for 30 years, we've been lying about why we did it, we've been lying to the public, we've been lying to our family members, we've been lying about how we tried to cover it all up. I mean, he's like, you better have the mea culpas to end all mea culpas if you really want an opportunity at this. And if you do, I'm sure a judge will entertain that. And by the way, so will we. Now, what's really going to happen here? That's quite a gauntlet to throw down, isn't it? I think this may have been probably the worst way it could have ended up for the Menendez brothers, because now Nathan Hochman has essentially positioned himself as somebody who's, and I think he did a remarkable job of not allowing kind of personal politics or feelings or any of that stuff to play a role. It was all law and facts, facts and law. But he said, I'm not going to say never and never for all time. I'm saying you want to come clean. You want to be honest. You want to admit. You want to tell everybody what you did and why you did it for the first time ever, truthfully. Then we can have an actual conversation. Now, what happens if they do? Well, won't that just absolutely look like they're doing this just to get out of jail? And he even acknowledged that. It has to be honest. If you're doing it just to get out of jail, that's not for real. But what if they do honestly do this? Now they've just admitted how they've been lying for 30 years to their loved ones and to the public and to everybody else and their attorneys on their behalf. And I thought, wow, what a way to put these guys into a real spot. And it's in their court. What do they want to do? Do they want to go ahead and accept this challenge and see if it won't give them an opportunity to get out? I don't know. I'm really interesting to see, because I know Mark Garagos is going to have some response to this. And I know the brothers and the family members and everybody will have some response. And I'm sure a lot of it will be going after Nathan Hochman. But I'll be honest with you. I thought he handled that in a very politically savvy and absolutely following the law type of way. All right. We got to move on, because I don't got a lot of time, and I'm probably going to regret having agreed to do this court TV thing, but life is crazy. So here we are. Okay. Jeffrey Ferguson, they declared a mistrial. This is the 74-year-old judge out of Orange County. He was accused of shooting and killing his wife, Cheryl, after he pulled a gun out of his ankle holster after she kind of apparently dared him to do it. And he went ahead and shot her. He claimed and testified on the stand that it was an accident. The jury deliberated for 8 days. That was longer than the actual presentation of evidence in the trial. That was a long time to deliberate. And they had many, many questions. And we're all sitting back there wondering, what on earth were they thinking? Well, we found out today that jury was hung 11-1 for guilt on second-degree murder. And I got to tell you, after being a prosecutor, and I've had cases that have hung about this close, it is infuriating, because what you realize, it had nothing to do with your case. It had nothing to do with who didn't you call, who did you call, how did you argue this or that. It had everything to do with jury selection. That is one juror who probably should not have been on that jury. Now, everybody's entitled to their opinion, and I don't mean to make light of that person, and I'm sure they deliberated with earnestness. But that to me signals somebody who is just dug in for whatever reason. And I will tell you this right now, of everybody that jury, that those prosecutors are upset with, it's probably not that juror. It's probably the judge. And I don't mean this judge. I mean the judge presiding over it, for not giving them enough time to voir dire. Because I'll tell you this, I've had juries hang. And I've had them hang because there's one personality on there I didn't notice. And I've had them hang because I was given 20 minutes to voir dire 40 people. And when you've got basically 30 seconds to discuss with each person, you don't get enough time to discuss with every person. And there is no way you can figure out who everybody is. And that's why I feel like a lot of times these voir dires are a huge waste of time when we get to a situation like this. So the other thing to consider about this is one of those situations where they had to acquit completely on second-degree murder before they moved to manslaughter. So because they did not acquit completely a second-degree murder, he's going to be retried on that if they decide to retry him on that. Do you remember the Daniel Penny case? This was a case where it looks like they were hung on the big count, and they went ahead and said, Your Honor, we'll withdraw that, knowing how close they are. And they went ahead and then acquitted of the underlying count. But it's just another one of those instances where we see these jurors find themselves in a situation where they can't agree on the more serious charge, and then therefore can't even get to the less serious charge. They likely would have convicted here, I'm guessing, of that manslaughter in this case, but they did not. And why is that important that we have that? It's important for the prosecution for a situation like this, because the prosecution thinks that they have a righteous second-degree murder here, and they've now had 11 out of 12 jurors tell them that they're right. I am pretty sure that this is a situation where they feel like they will want to retry this again. I do not see this thing ending in some sort of a compromise and a plea negotiation, especially given the advanced age of Mr. Ferguson and the fact that he's lived a lifelong career where he's never stepped foot inside of a jail unless that was to speak to a defendant. And I don't think there's anything going to be on the table that he will be willing to accept. So I would not be surprised if this comes back for a retrial. All right, we've got a few minutes left to talk about what's coming up this week before I got to run out of here and run back onto court TV. You could go ahead and check it out if you like. I don't want to tell you guys don't, but you've already heard everything I have to say, probably explained with more freedom than I will on court TV. And I'd rather you stick around and watch our interview with Candace DeLong. But Monica Cementelli has her trial ongoing. The big news in that is that Christopher Austin, who was one of the co-defendants who took part in the stabbing of her husband, testified. Interesting thing about it is that he said they were receiving all their directions from Monica, but those directions were coming through text messages that he did not see. But it appeared to him that every time they would receive a text, they knew what to do next, though he never spoke to and never heard from Monica. That's a big issue, I think, in this case, is how do they draw that direct line from Austin to Monica saying that she gave the orders when it looks like Mr. Baker might testify on her behalf and say she never gave the orders. I was texting somebody else. This case, as strong as it is, could take some interesting turns coming up here. In court this week today was actually Torelina Fields. She killed and dismembered her mother. She's coming back for a competency hearing. There's no shock there. She's obviously got some mental health issues. Jaron Warner, who was just indicted alongside his father, Dale Warner, for the disappearance and killing of Dee Warner out of Michigan, had a probable cause hearing today. I'm not quite sure what that is, but that's what he had today. Courtney Clenny. I'm cutting it close here, folks, but I think we'll get it done. Courtney Clenny will be back on Tuesday out of Florida. She killed her boyfriend, Christian Obumseli. According to the state of Florida, she will have a status hearing on Tuesday. Brad Simpson out of Texas with the no-body case of his missing wife, Suzanne Simpson, will have a discovery hearing on Wednesday, along with Rex Heuermann. The Gilgo Beach killer out of New York will have a pretrial hearing that same day, Wednesday. This Thursday, David Pierce, the man now found guilty and convicted for taking the lives of Christy Giles and Hilda Cabrales after drugging them one evening and leaving their bodies at separate hospitals, will be sentenced. He's looking at 148 years in prison. That will take place on Thursday. And finally, Jennifer Ledhill will be back into a Utah court to talk about the missing no-body case of her husband, Matthew Johnson. And I will be surprised if Court TV doesn't refer to her as the Queen of Hearts killer. Stick around. This week we have Wednesday Night Live. Gavin Fish will be our guest on that. Really looking forward to speaking with him. And this Sunday, folks, is Sunday Fun Day. So leave us your messages. Love to hear from you. It's going to be a very fun Sunday. I got to cut it short, everybody. Thank you so much. Have a great evening. Take care. Bye-bye.